Thank you, Ciara. Minister, my question relates to early childhood care and education professionals. There's growing evidence, as I'm sure you're aware, of the educational impact and importance of the preschool phase of childhood care and education. And there's been a historic reluctance on the part of the state, I think, to view this as an educational aspect of childhood development. So can I ask, Minister, do you accept the educational aspect of early childhood care and education? And if so, can I ask what you are willing to do to advance the profession of early childhood care and education professionals in terms of professional development, funding of professional development, terms and conditions and so forth? Thank you.
Minister.
Well, I have a script here, and I'll come to it in a second. But I just want to say that one of the first things I said when I became minister was that I considered this area to be very important, the whole early childhood care and education. And I put a number of measures in place as Minister for Education, with responsibility for the educational content, as opposed to the overall responsibility which Minister Riley has for the early years. The care and education of babies and young children are inextricably linked elements in a child's holistic development, and the education provided by preschool childcare professionals is an important element, but not the only element of their work. To support the diversity of pedagogical approaches in the early years sector, my department oversaw the development of a curriculum framework for early childhood education, which could scaffold all these different approaches, including Montessori. As a further support, the NCCA has gone on to develop an online resource which distills the key elements of Síolta and Aistir, and which will be available next week. Most, if not all, Montessori-trained practitioners are employed in private preschool education services, and their terms and conditions of employment are not set by the state. How the state should invest in early years education is being taken very seriously by the government, and my colleague in the Department of Children and Youth Affairs has recently established an interdepartmental group to identify the optimum means of investing in the sector. But just to say, for my own part, I've also established an early years advisory group, and I have got funding for a small number of inspectors, educationally based inspectors, so that their purpose will be to go in and assist in terms of the educational content of the early years. And I've also established an examination of the various qualifications that people get in order to work in the early years.
Deputy Donnelly.
Thank you. So, Minister, I very much welcome your agreement and interest in the educational component. And in fact, there's research from around the world that shows that educational investment at the preschool age, be it 2, 3, 4, is actually the most effective educational investment a state can make. Here's the problem. On the one hand, the government is saying, we take this very seriously, we value childcare professionals, we accept and embrace the educational component of this, and this is something we are looking at. However, it is up to the childcare providers to set the terms and conditions. However, we, the government, actually pay them through ECI, and we pay them such a small amount, and we provide so few supports for childcare in Ireland that actually most of the childcare workers have to exist on minimum wage while the term is in. They have to go on welfare benefits during school holidays, and really that's nothing to do with us. So can I ask you as Minister, if you accept the core educational importance of this, do you accept that we should be treating, training, holding to account and paying our early childcare professionals in a commensurate way and taking them as seriously as we do primary and secondary school teachers? Thank you.
Well, I do agree that these early years are vitally important to children, and particularly important to children whose home may not have the kind of supports that other homes might have in terms of books, in terms of vocabulary, in terms of, you know, all of the things that make a difference in terms of a child being ready to benefit from the education system. And as I say, that's why I put a particular priority in that area when I became Minister for Education and Skills. And I do agree that that whole sector needs a focus, and it needs to be valued in a way that will, I think, then bring up the wages. Obviously, the work my colleague Minister Nash is doing in terms of minimum wage will in particular help that sector. And Minister Riley has established this cross-departmental group. We are participating on it from my department, and I would expect that we will generally raise the resources that go into that area. Obviously, there was no money in the last few years available for any sector sector. But certainly I agree with Deputy Donnelly that this is an area that does need focus, and that in some cases there's an undervaluing of the sector generally.
Deputy Donnelly.
Thank you, Minister. And again, I welcome what sounds like a very useful step in the right direction. If I could just reframe your answer, though, let's imagine the answer you just given was about primary school teachers. You said, yes, we value primary school teachers. Yes, we're putting an interdepartmental group together, and we're looking at the minimum wage. Like, if we as a state paid primary school teachers the minimum wage, regardless of what we said and what interdepartmental groups were set up and how much we said we respected them, if we were paying the minimum wage, it would be a very clear signal that actually we're not investing in this area, we're not serious about the professional development. So can I ask, Minister, on the basis that you clearly are thinking about this and you're working with your colleagues, when might the sector, because the childhood professionals are screaming for support. They're on the minimum wage, they move on to social welfare, and we're saying at the same time, not only do we respect you, actually we believe that your educational input is at least as important as our other educational professionals. So can I ask you specifically two questions? When might the childhood providers see a package coming from government that supports both continuous professional development of them, with commensurate accountability, of course, and a substantial look at investment in moving from minimum wage to something more commensurate with other teachers in society? Thank you.
Minister, to conclude this.
Well, I think quite honestly, one of the problems here is that a lot of the providers are private. They're private companies, private individuals, and so they're paying the people working in the sector, and in turn the parents are providing the funding for that, because we're coming from a very low base in terms of this whole area. There's been no progress on this, practically no progress for many, many years in Ireland compared to other countries. But Minister Riley has told me that he intends that this will be a short period of time that this cross-departmental group will work, and that it will report before the summer. And I expect then we will be able to give you definite answers to the questions you've posed with regard to time frame.
Thank you. Deputy Charlie McConville.